Hey guys, welcome to a new chapter from Chisinau. We are here in Moldova. We just took a tour, a walking tour, a free walking tour in the capital of this country. We have found a guy who has a really interesting story. That's why I invited him to talk a little bit about his experience, his life. He comes from Turkey and he was actually with refugees around the world. All right, I just want to ask you about your experience in the last months, especially with Ukraine. Let's start with Ukraine.
Okay.
What have you done in the last months in that country? Where have you been? What have you done?
Okay, so I'm a humanitarian aid worker, and I have been working with refugees and also other people affected by the crisis for the last 10 years approximately. So since the beginning of the war, actually, the organization that I'm working for is supporting refugees in the neighboring countries where the refugees actually came. So, and also we are also supporting the IDPs, the people who had to leave their hometowns in Ukraine as well. So, I mean, we do some cash support, we provide cash support, but we also try to do some protection intervention where people can reach their documentation, their rights as a refugee in the countries. Yeah.
And how did you end up in this type of job?
I started as a volunteer in the university. I was mainly working for human rights NGOs. But then somehow with the Syrian crisis in Turkey, like when the Syrian war and the Syrian refugees started to come to Turkey, I took a job because I had a lot of NGO experience, and so this is what I'm doing for the last 10 years.
And that was 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
When the Syrian
yeah.
war started. And what has been the most confronting experience for you?
It was actually in Syria border. I mean, for me, seeing these people leaving their country, coming, like they were just passing the border with kids in their hands, and if they can carry some small bags in their hands, and that was all of their life. So, I mean, that was a hard moment to see. Actually, for me, it was like the most, let's say, one of the hardest moments for me. And it made me think a lot. I mean, what happens? I mean, now in the middle of the Europe, there's a war, and what happens if there's a war in my country? What I need to take with me? Do I need to take my documentations, keep them on cloud? I mean, so of course, like I can't talk on behalf of refugees. I'm just trying facilitating some support to them. But what I see is it's quite hard.
And it's actually so confronting because I think a lot of people have got used to watching that type of images on the TV, and people are like, oh, one more refugee, oh, that's all right. And I think people are becoming to ignore that situation in Europe, right? A lot of people, I will say, but...
Yeah, I mean, the agenda or the topics change quite fast in this modern world. So now the energy crisis, I mean, in the beginning, all Europe, let's say, were supporting the refugees a lot. I mean, they're still supporting, but now the energy crisis will also hit the Europe as well. So everybody started thinking about their own problems as well. So unfortunately, the refugee issue is, unfortunately, it's losing a little bit of the interest.
That's right. And what type of support your organization provides to refugees? Like is money, food, clothes?
So actually, we are not directly implementing here because we are believing the importance of the local actors. So as an international humanitarian organization, we are supporting the local, so Moldovan NGOs who are actually face-to-face or daily base supporting the refugees. So we are supporting the accommodation centers, we are supporting some basic needs projects, we are supporting some cash-based interventions so people receive monthly support for their basic needs and for their needs on protection.
Right. And what type of positions can you find in your organization? For someone who wants to work in this type of organization, what can they do?
Yeah, actually, there's a lot to do. So there are technical positions. I mean, as an engineer, you can work. As a food engineer, you can work. You can find a job. I don't know. As an accountant, we have accountants. We have human resources. But at the same time, we have technical person like psychologists, social workers as well. So it's actually a quite range of positions, including drivers, cleaners. It's like actually, you can imagine like we call it the third sector. I mean, not the private, but not the public, but as a third sector, the NGOs. Actually, there's a lot of work opportunities as well.
And the company is actually providing support in Ukraine, in Syria, any other country?
all around. Actually, it's called so I'm representing actually two organizations. One is Diakoni Katastrophenhilfe. It's a German humanitarian organization, and at the same time I'm also representing a Turkish humanitarian organization which is called Support to Life. And actually, Diakoni Katastrofen Elfe is working all around the world, actually, on all crisis or disaster affected areas.
And how do you find the perspectives of refugees about other cultures? So it's easy for them to get involved in other countries, or do you think it's a bit challenging for them to get used to it?
Okay, so for example, for Moldova, I can say that the language is not a big barrier because Russian is a common language. So in Moldova, most of the people speak Russian, and Ukrainian refugees understand or could communicate in Russian. So mostly old people or people who doesn't want to be far away from their countries, they prefer to stay in the neighboring countries, and the language is a good let's say attractive point for them so that they can communicate. But the young people or some people who are looking for some other opportunities, they mainly travel to Middle Europe or Germany, Netherlands, or they would like to go to other countries. Poland has quite a lot of refugees for the time being.
And I guess it's easier for them to move within borders, because they don't need to move far away from the country. And if the situations are getting better, they might go back to the country.
Exactly, and there are some refugees who has their land over there. So for the harvest, some of them, they went back to do the harvest. If they could sell their goods, they did. So from Moldova to Ukraine, of course, it depends where they live, but it's very close. They can come and go.
And what is actually the best country right now that is providing good support to refugees? Because, for example, in the last weeks, we actually have another chapter with some Ukrainians in Berlin. We interviewed them. They actually shared with us some experience, and it was actually really interesting because they were telling us about the support they get from the government, from the German government. And also in Bulgaria, for example, in Sofia, local families, they get 50 local money, which is about $10. And with that money, the families can get food for the refugees. Have you heard about any program in any country from the government?
Yeah, in almost every countries, the governments with support of United Nations, actually they provide some cash programs. So refugees can register there and they can get some either cash or in-kind support. But of course, people ask, when we ask people, Germany, and not only for the Ukrainian refugees, but the refugees from all around the world, Germany is one of the most attractive points, I would say. Most of the people, they want to go to Germany. I think because of the high and quality life standards over there.
It's actually quite interesting because I went to Berlin, as I say, a few weeks ago, and we found 3 demonstrations the same day. One from Ukrainians, the second one from people from Afghanistan, and the other one were people from Palestine. So 3 demonstrations, which, as you say, demonstrates that Germany is a good country for refugees to go there and get support from the government.
And maybe one point it's important, I believe, when we talk about refugees, unfortunately we have seen a big difference how European countries treat refugees from Ukraine and refugees from third countries. So, of course, for me, it's one refugee approach. Whoever leave the country, it's not an easy thing, and everyone has right to access to a safer country, safer place for him or her and the family. But unfortunately, this was a case for most of the European countries. So, even in the border, because there were already some refugees or people from third countries living in Ukraine and they had to come to here and different countries, they were not treated the same.
I actually saw on the news a couple of people from Africa with Ukrainian passport, and they were treated in a different way, so they were not allowed to come to Europe. But actually one thing that I heard in Berlin, which is quite interesting, is that a lot of people, this is quite confronting and it might be polemical for some people, but some people especially from Middle East and Africa, they were using fake passports in Germany to get benefits from the government. Not everyone does the same thing, but unfortunately some people take advantage of the situation,
there might be some people, but it shouldn't create a prejudice against refugees or,
exactly.
Because as I mentioned, you just leave your home with whatever you can take with you in your bag, and this becomes your life, and you try to create a new life in a new country. And when, it's not nice when everybody start to question if you are telling the truth, are you a real refugee or not, I think people need to be treated with respect and dignity. So I mean, the dignity of the people, I think, the most critical part in any humanitarian.
Now, how have you found Moldova?
It's nice. Like, to be honest, I didn't know a lot about the Moldova before I came to here, and I mean, people are really hospitable. They're really friendly. They have great parks. I like walking in the parks in the Chisinau, at least. Or they have great wine. Yeah, very nice people.
Even though it's considered the poorest country in Europe, we were talking about it before. Do you think it looks like the poorest country in Europe?
I think things changed a lot during the last decade. So I think also Moldova becoming more pro-European, and I think they start to get more support as well. But yeah, I think the pension rates are still low, so there are still some social problems as far as I am aware. But yeah, I mean, it's not. Yeah, I don't know. I as a let's say tourist or as an expat working here, I didn't feel that poverty a lot. What we see in the 90s in the movies or something, you know. I mean, life is different now.
No, and especially comparing with third world countries, like if you go to Asia, some countries, like Southern Asia, or if you go to South America, the situation is completely different. Even though this is the poorest country in Europe, it has good public transport. Yeah, you can tell we are in a public square, as you can see. And there is no crime, you know. There is no one is gonna come here and steal my camera or anything. So we feel safe.
Exactly. No, that's definitely, and it's really. I mean, if you would have any chance to come around, please visit Moldova. Yeah.
That's right. I think that's how we finish this chapter. Thank you so much for joining us. Keep in mind that we have one more chapter about Transnistria, which is very interesting. It's a really cool place to visit here in Moldova. And we have more adventures in this part of Europe. We have Romania, we have Sofia in Bulgaria, we have Greece, so many countries to explore. And we say, how do we say in Turkey? Ciao, ciao?
Güle güle.
All right, ciao, ciao.